kind of, checked out again.
Yeah. So something happens right here, Becca. Let's really
Hmm.
stay present here because it seems
Hmm.
like this is a spot where you want to check out or you want to go into thinking and kind of
Hmm.
maybe leave what's happening.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Maybe it's boring for you, or maybe I'm worrying that it's boring for me, but there's something that happens where it's like this
Hmm.
moment is uncomfortable.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. It feels like something builds.
Yeah. Yeah. So can we slow it down and really be curious what that building is?
I love this little segment here that we're watching right now, and it's interesting because in a way, I mean, so what just let me just give a little context here. What just happened is that Becca is reporting these moments where she just really checks out, right? And I think Amelia does a really great intervention there where, she really turns up the magnifying glass, right? You're really sort of focusing on what's going on in this moment. And I really like how you put it. You said maybe you're bored, maybe you think I'm bored or something like that. So really opening up the relational aspect of it there. We'll see there's something really intriguing that's playing out in the way dissociation is working in this segment here.
Okay. Well, if I'm real honest, I start to feel the building and then I forget what I'm doing. It's like
Yeah.
I can't even remember what I was just doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really great awareness. You go blank in your mind. You can't even remember
Hmm.
what we're doing here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels nice to admit that.
Okay, so I think there's something really powerful happening there, right? So basically what I'm seeing in this little clip is Amelia is turning up the dial on selective inhibition, right? She's saying like, okay, there's some kind of checking out thing happening here. So let's really hone in on it. Let's really focus in on it. That whole sort of pinch to zoom that you do on your iPhone to look at a picture, you get more detail, right? And so as she does that, then Becca says, I forgot the exact wording, Becca, but you said something um, like as I'm looking at this, I forget what I'm doing here, right? And folks, there's gold here, right? This is there's Becca's got a billboard in her system that's lit up in neon saying, "Hey, dig here," right? Look at this particular spot because this is the place that my consciousness says is completely off limits, right? And let me give you like I have a couple of examples of this. I'm from my own work. I remember doing a session. I was receiving a session from Paula Branch, she's one of our other instructors, and I was in this like fear process, all sorts of defensive responses, all sorts of state two waves going on, real like fireworks and intensity, right? And I'm working in that area and completing waves. And at one point, I just like flip into some, there's no other way to describe it, but it felt like a room in my psyche, right? That was partitioned off from everything else that was going on, right? So it's almost like somebody's just in the middle of a wave, a middle of intensity, and then just like waking up and saying like, what are we doing here again? I mean, literally that kind of amnesia that turns on from being in total fear for, a period of time. And then after you pass this one spot in your psyche, you don't know what you're doing there at all, right? Um, and the way that I think about that is that, well, to some degree, we're dealing with splits here, right? We're dealing with sort of these compartmentalizations in that we have in our psyches, and sometimes they're really well sectioned off, right? And what I see with this work in that kind of presentation is that you just stay with it, right? You stay with that confusion, you stay with that, I don't know what I'm doing here, and people will flip into and out of it. But what happens over time is it feels like the separation between those rooms starts to thin out. Like little bits of information are able to get through from one area of your psyche to another area of your psyche, and until finally, the room becomes available to you. Yeah. Do either of you have comments on this section?
I just appreciate you explaining it that way, and yeah, deepening my understanding of what I was experiencing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, people will it'll show up in these really subtle ways where you'll be working with somebody and they'll just go away and then come back, and it can happen so subtly that they don't know they went away and came back, and you don't know they went away and came back. But again, and even though it might happen in a short, brief, little bit of time, there could be an entire world down there that's being obscured. I've got another example of what this looks like in a student, which was, um, uh, we saw something like this happening, and the student would use this word. They'd use a very specific word to refer to it, and literally, it felt to him like he was passing out, right? Like he just completely, his consciousness would go away, and then he would just say like, "Oh, I was drifting." We had to really dial up the selective inhibition and put the magnifying glass over that moment of drifting until it just we saw more and more of it. And folks, this is a really, these can be really deeply entrenched defenses, right? Like if we're talking about a split in a person's psyche, it's pretty deep. And so, you'll have to stay with it for a while. But gradually, so I'm asking for your trust on this one, but gradually over time, the drift doesn't just become a second, but it becomes like, oh, I'm starting to drift, So in other words, you're getting details, you're getting warnings, you're getting like these flags that come up that the client is able to track and notice that they're moving into one of these states, right? And gradually, you're just expanding it, and they'll see more and more of it over time. But if they're deep, it does take time. And folks, if anybody wants to comment on that, they're welcome to.
Yeah, I'm used to, and I've been practicing just when people go into drifting, just basically letting them, just welcoming it and, having them feel my presence while they're drifting, and, just a classic state 4 freeze. But you're describing the partition between, like, so when do we do one or the other?
I think I'm not describing the classic state 4 here, right? It's state 4, there's no doubt about it, but it's not the classic state 4. I think this is a kind of dissociation that shows up that is so profound. It does exactly what we saw in the clip, right? Which was, Becca was talking and saying like, what are we doing here? Like, it's really kind of blanking out a person's consciousness. Right, which I think is different than the classic state 4 of floating and knowing that, being able to track that you don't have a body and being able to track that you're in a quiet place or something like that. This happens so quickly and profoundly that people can't track it easily at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's clear.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.